So, Macbeth, the power of the supernatural. Obviously, Macbeth is a supernatural play. We all know that. That's something we take as read. But what I want to look at is I want to look today at the role that I think the supernatural plays within Macbeth. And I want to particularly suggest to you some theories, basically, about it. My thesis that I'm taking today is that the supernatural is the true antagonist of the play. Of course, we know this is a tragedy, and therefore we're expecting it to have certain tragic roles, a protagonist, an antagonist, victim, etc. And you can argue about who those roles are, apart from the protagonist, of course. But my view is, it's not Lady Macbeth who's the antagonist. It is the supernatural itself, not even just the witches, the whole of the supernatural, which dominates the play. And as the antagonist, the key thing it does is it encourages Macbeth into murder. And then, and this is important because that's pretty obvious, and then it brings him down afterwards. And the reason for this is because I feel that Shakespeare uses it to associate evil with the idea of unchecked ambition. Now, you know some of my thoughts on ambition if you're at the other one on Macbeth I did a few weeks back, where I pointed out that I felt that Shakespeare in Macbeth is not saying ambition is a bad thing. Shakespeare is saying that ambition is fine if it's mixed with loyalty. Okay, and that's what my thesis on Macbeth and Banquo thing was. Now, in this case, what he's saying is when ambition is not checked by loyalty, it associates with evil. And in particular, it's about this idea of the disruption of the natural order. And what I'm going to come back to over and over again here is that I think what Shakespeare does in Macbeth, he shows the problems of taking the natural order of things, whether you call it the great chain of being or whatever. We know we're in a period of time in which there was a strong belief that everything had its place and everything had its order. And he's showing us that if you disrupt that order in any kind of way, you are letting in evil forces. Okay? The idea that they are there to achieve that. That's the purpose of evil. The purpose of the supernatural is to attempt to disrupt the natural order. And that is what it's up to in this play. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to take you through a number of different elements of impact that the supernatural has during the play. But I'm going to start us off with the witches. And I'll start us off at the very beginning with the witches. The fact that this is the first scene of the play means that Shakespeare is choosing to establish evil right at the beginning. Play starts, this is about evil. This is about the supernatural. Believe in the supernatural, be wary of evil. The first stage direction, therefore, the first thing that we're going to hear when they come on is thunder and lightning. Storms. A disruption of the natural order, chaos. They are associated with chaotic weather, with the nature, the chaotic part of nature as they walk on the stage. Now, to see why that's important, first of all, remember that Shakespeare does not use many stage directions. He didn't need to. He wasn't writing for publication, you know, for other people to have a look at. He was writing when he wrote down kind of rehearsal copies in which he would basically just be able to hand them out to people there. He was there at the time. He was there able to direct and tell people what to do in the play. He didn't have to write stage directions down. And he did write down thunder and lightning. And then think to yourself, how hard would that have been to achieve in the Globe Theatre in 1606 during the day? Thunder and lightning effects. So it's important to him. It's significant that that's what happens. Then, and as you're aware, these sessions are very much about stretching into the highest levels. So apologies if you don't know what on earth I'm talking about here. But I'm sure most of you are aware that Shakespeare's plays are largely written in iambic pentameter, a very strict poetic rhythm of 10 syllables with the stress coming on every other beat. Da-dum, da-dum, that kind of thing, okay, 5 times. The idea is plays, it was a convention, plays are written in poetical form in those days. And the idea is that iambic pentameter then imitates the natural rhythms of speech. Now, when the witches come on, they don't. They don't speak in iambic pentameter. They do speak in rhythm, but they speak in trochaic tetrameter. Now, trochaic, the opposite to iambic. As I said, iambics were da-dum, 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 da-dum. Trochees are dum-dee, dum-dee, dum-dee. So the harsh beat is at the beginning. It's punchier. It's far less natural. It sounds very, very obvious. Now, we won't necessarily have to identify all of that for us to hear, as you have done yourself, that when the witches come and start talking, it sounds right. It doesn't sound right. Add to that the rhyme that is being used throughout, and they sound immediately incredibly unnatural. They are not part of the established order. They are not part of what's around them. So again, very important for us to see that they are, and I often use the term other. Okay? What they are, but they are other. They don't belong to society. They're outside it. And in a society that was very scared of outsiders, that's a big issue. Now, also during that opening scene, again, I'm not going for the blatantly obvious bits, they call on, two of the witches call on their familiars. You may well remember it. I come Grey Morkin, Paddock calls. And Grey Morkin and Paddock are witches' familiars. The idea of witches having a kind of a creature along with them, a slightly demonic creature, that does its bidding and even feeds from them and things such as that. And I think it's quite clear that Grey Morkin would have been a cat, Paddock would have been a toad. Now, why is that important? Okay, yes, it always goes with witches. Well, there's a theory that goes around with this. That's two familiars, three witches. Where's the third witch's familiar? And the theory is that Macbeth? Or is that Lady Macbeth? That they are essentially the third witch's familiar, that they get to do their bidding. Is that why he's left the third one off? It's possible, but what it does is it suggests the relationship between them. So evil is very clearly established at the beginning, and then alongside that, we see that they deal in paradoxes. Throughout this, we have things such as, obviously, fair is foul and foul is fair, where they are declaring things that are the opposite. The battle is lost and won at the same time. We understand them, but they kind of present a world where nothing is certain. Fair is foul and foul is fair. Which is it? What's going on? Right? So these idea of paradoxes, which will come throughout the play and are used in a lot of situations, we hear Macbeth use them as well, again creates a sense of unfamiliarity. Now, it's a definite thing with the witches, which I often deal with in my classes. But one of the difficulties for anyone putting on a production of Macbeth these days is to get the appropriate effect with the witches, because you put witches on stage and it's laughable to us. We're not a society that believes in witches or has any kind of connection with the idea of witches except at Halloween, and therefore they're laughable. So modern versions of this have to adjust that and think, what would we use instead of witches? What unsettles people? What makes them feel that things are other? One of the most popular ones in recent times has been the use of children who almost behave like adults and speak like adults with knowing ways of speaking. That kind of creeps out most people and seems unfamiliar. And I think that's what we're looking at here. So if you're talking about the power of the supernatural, look at the power right from the beginning in those opening first few lines, how clearly that's established for us. But of course, the witches aren't left there. They only appear, of course, twice more. We don't count the scenes with Hecate. They've been largely debunked. They weren't written by Shakespeare. They will never come up in one of your exams. Okay, so ignore those if you haven't already been told to. The three times they come on are that scene at the beginning, Act 1, Scene 3, when they prophesy to Macbeth, and Act 4, Scene 1, when Macbeth comes to them. Now, here are 4 things across the rest of the play that I then think tells you something about the nature of their power, and therefore the nature of the supernatural power. We've got evil and their importance established. But if they're the antagonist, this is part of my argument, if they're the antagonist, remember, all they can do is antagonize, right? They can only create situations. Macbeth has to make the choice to take hold of them. And I think you can see that through some of these. Now, the first one, something that is ignored in most productions, the exchange between the witches in that second scene they appear in Act 1, Scene 3, before Macbeth walks off. They have a little exchange, it's a very, very strange little bit, where the first witch says she saw a sailor's wife who was eating chestnuts, and she wanted those chestnuts, and the sailor's wife said no. And so she's going to go and torture. Well, torture her husband, the sailor, right? Because of it. That's basically the idea. Now, what's the significance of that? Well, one thing, it shows you the witches are pretty petty. Don't give you your chestnuts, right? I'll use my power to destroy your husband. But secondly, it's what they say they're going to do to the husband. It's not going for killing, it's tormenting. And it suggests that's the limit of their powers, that they can only torment. This is why they need Macbeth for the murder. They can only create these situations. Okay? That's what it suggests to me. So again, if we're thinking overall about the idea of them as antagonists, they need earthly vessels. They need people to take these on board with them. Now, that comes across in the obsession with sleep. Throughout the play, and I'm sure you're aware and have noted yourself before, there's a lot of use of sleep as an image. And what they do is they disrupt sleep. So what they say they're going to do to the sailor, they're going to go out to his ship and they're going to create a storm, and they're going to, it's going to go everywhere, rock everywhere, all over the place, and he won't be able to sleep. Of course, we are well aware that Macbeth says he will sleep no more. And throughout the play, Lady Macbeth makes comments that you just need to get some sleep. We know at the end of the play, Lady Macbeth, in her final appearance, is sleepwalking. She cannot sleep properly. She cannot sleep effectively. And therefore, what we have is we have a situation in which she has disrupted sleep and then opens up and reveals various things about what's going on. But we also get it with Banquo. I'll look at this a little bit more in a second, and I mentioned it in the previous one as well, where Banquo mentions at one point at the beginning of Act 2 that he is having horrific dreams, and so he is actually actively avoiding sleep because he's trying to escape those dreams. They're again disrupting, and I think that's a good way of thinking about the supernatural in this. This is a disruptor. It disrupts the natural order. It disrupts nature. And you can see the effect and the impact of it in the second 2 scenes that they have. In Act 1, Scene 3, Macbeth is just a soldier playing a glance, that's it. They go and seek him out to give him these prophecies, to try and get him on board and try and get him as the vessel they can use. But Act 4, Scene 1, Macbeth is king. He's the leader. He's the dominant one. But he goes and seeks them out. Those 2 scenes, and if you look on the video site on YouTube, there's a past one here where I talk about pairings in Macbeth. And I talk about the pairing of those 2 scenes. If you look at them, they are exact same structure, the exact same structure all the way through those 2, with just slight little variations that show you the difference. And one of those big variations is that despite the fact he's supposedly got the power, Macbeth is after them. He seeks them out. And he asks rather than is told. They are in control. So even though he's become king, what we see is the impact and the power of them is they've managed to use him to gain control. And another small bit that's easily forgotten, when they're standing around the cauldron at the beginning of Act 4, Scene 1, and thrown a bit in. You know the bit that you all did at primary school probably, where you had a cauldron and you all danced around it and said, you know, double, double, toil and trouble, all that kind of thing. If you actually look at those ingredients that go in the cauldron, I won't go into depth now, but if you look at what they are, they're not randomly chosen, they're not just a bit horrific. There's a lot of connection with instruments of darkness, right? Animals or creatures or things that are attached to darkness. There's a lot of connection with what they would call heretics, you know, people who are unbelievers, people who aren't Christians. It's a very strange collection. Disruption of innocence, bits of babies, that kind of thing goes in there. Again, it shows you the nature of their power, bits and pieces that come together and go somewhere. So my point is, they are disruptors. That's the nature of their power. They need other vessels to go with them. And of course, they get one in Macbeth. So how do they get them? They get it through an influence. And this is where the argument can come. What degree of influence do they have and when does it start? Now, the first three things I'm going to show you here are lines from main characters in the play in the first few scenes. Duncan finishes Act 1, Scene 2, saying about the Thane of Cawdor, what he has lost, noble Macbeth hath won. Macbeth, as we know, first line is so foul and fair a day I've not seen. It's first line in the play. And Lady Macbeth's first line in the play, not counting, of course, her reading out a letter, is glance thou art and Cawdor and shalt be what thou art promised. Now, what I would argue there is that most definitely the last two, but I'd argue the first as well, are deliberately expressed that way by Shakespeare to show the influence of the antagonist, of the supernatural on the people, how they're influencing them. Let me say what I mean. First of all, let's take the Macbeth one. Macbeth walks on and says, so foul and fair a day I've not seen. Why would you use that paradox? Why would you use that phrasing? The fact that we have literally 2 scenes before heard the witches say it and repeat it, fair is foul and foul is fair, means that we create a link in our head between the two. And this is before Macbeth has ever met the witches. In fact, it is the only line Macbeth says before he meets the witches in the play. The suggestion is he is already being influenced by them, which is probably how they know that he's the one to go to. They want to meet with him after all, not Banquo, not Malcolm. And then looking at Lady Macbeth, it seems more tenuous, but I don't think it is. Her first line in the play is to say, you're going to be king. Well, that shows you a lot about her. But Glamis, Cawdor, king. The same order that the witches go in. It's the same semantic order as the witches go in. Now, you might say, well, yeah, obviously. But quite interestingly, and I pointed this out when we had the Banquo one before, when Banquo mentions the 3 things, he does them in reverse. He does king, Cawdor, Glamis. She always does them in that way. And to add to that, she uses the phrase shalt be, which is the exact phrase or part of the exact phrase that the witches used when they said, how to be Macbeth, that shalt be king hereafter. So when they're talking about the same thing, you're going to be king, they use the same. If you think that's coincidence, what she says, the witches said, shalt be king hereafter. When Lady Macbeth first greets Macbeth in the play, she says the same. Great Glamis, worthy Cawdor, greater than both by the all hail hereafter. She uses that as, again, it's there for us. There's an impact on her language. The question is how much? Well, in my argument, it's the antagonist. And therefore, it's just there as an influence, and one that can be rejected. And I would argue that we see Banquo reject it, and that tells us something else. This then I add in because, of course, they said when the battle's lost and won, and then we hear Duncan say the other way. Is this meaning they're getting to Duncan as well, possibly? It's a stretch maybe, but it's definitely worth considering. Then, when we go past that, we come to the thing that I was talking about with Banquo. This is Act 2, Scene 1. Now, again, it takes you to how they are attempting to influence him. He's saying, merciful powers, this is when he's saying, I don't want to go to sleep. Restrain in me the cursed thoughts that nature gives way to in repose. Calling out to the merciful powers, interestingly, remember, we've a few scenes earlier seen Lady Macbeth calling out to the evil powers, the evil spirits. He's calling on the merciful powers. His choice is to allow himself to those. Restraining me the cursed thoughts. So there are cursed thoughts. What are they? Are they going to be the same as Macbeth's? Are they going to be about murder? About finding a way to get his children to be kings? Whatever. He's getting those thoughts naturally in repose, when he is in repose, when he is sleeping, when he is resting. Please keep them away from me. So again, it shows the impact, what they're doing again. They're invading people's minds, they're influencing them, but it also shows they can be rejected. And then, of course, they take a step further. The dagger soliloquy, the famous dagger soliloquy, often, Macbeth himself discusses, is this real or is this not? Is this in my head or is it actually happening in front of me? And so do we. But to me, it is there, at least for him. To me, this is the same as Banquo's ghost when it turns up. It's real, it's there for him. This is them actually making sure he does it. He is on his way to commit murder. We know he has been going back and forth about it, vacillating, if you like, between the two decisions. And he's on his way there. Will he actually do it? Here comes a dagger to show him the way, to draw him on. It's a way of making him and drawing him further and closer to it. So I think that's all evidence there of how the supernatural attempts to influence, but also evidence that you have to make the choice to let them in. Otherwise, it's not a tragedy. If Macbeth doesn't have a choice, then we just feel sorry for him. He must have a choice. However, he does make that choice. And once he makes that choice, he invites in chaos. And I said to you at the beginning, one of the key parts of my thesis here is that what Shakespeare is presenting to us is that supernatural forces want chaos. They want to disrupt the natural order of things. Macbeth becoming king is a disruption of the natural order by killing the king. He's not the king. He might be promoted there just normally, and that's fine. But by actually getting in there and doing something yourself, you are destroying the natural order of things. So what we're interested in is the theory of chaos. Not the chaos theory, but the theory here that I've got of chaos. And I think throughout the play, you will see a huge number of examples in which we see the supernatural bringing chaos to the world. First example is really that is the purpose of the witches, that is what they are attempting to do. They are attempting to draw Macbeth into doing something that will bring chaos to the world. I think that's unarguable. But then, and I touched on this before, as soon as he does what they need, and remember, all they need him to do is kill Duncan. They don't need him after that. In fact, after that, they probably don't want him because now he is king. So probably the next thing to do is disrupt the order again, create more chaos. So what do? Well, straight after the murder of Duncan, remember he comes in all paranoid and traumatized, carrying the daggers, unable to cope. And he comes up with several things that he said happened after he committed the murder. It's very important. It was after he committed the murder. He was coming back down and he says he heard, I think it's Malcolm and Donald Bain saying prayers. Isn't it nice they say their prayers before bed? Saying prayers, and he says, I had need of blessing. Obviously, I just know their father. I had need of blessing, and amen stuck in my throat. Now, Lady Macbeth's interpretation of this is, don't worry about it. Just think, you know, you're traumatized. What's going on? What's the problem? For him, it's a deliberate thing. They're stopping me from having any religious contact, any saying amen, you know, and bring it to any kind of conclusion. And I've happened to think that that's a very strong possibility that that is part of what they're doing, winding him up that way. Then the whole sleep no more thing. And notice once again, he uses the Glamis corridor king, because I suppose he's king almost by now, pattern, repeating like that as well. But this idea of this voice that cries out, sleep no more. Again, Lady Macbeth, being practical, says, who? Who was that then? Okay, you heard this voice? Yeah, sure. Who was it? Disembodied voice. But again, for me, it's the supernatural getting in and messing with his head. Walking back, already traumatized, a voice saying, you will never sleep again. You've just murdered sleep. Now, I don't know about you, but I like my sleep. Most difficult thing about having children by a long way. I like my sleep. I like to get my sleep. God, the idea of murdering sleep. If someone told me I'd never sleep again, couldn't cope. Maybe that's the same for Macbeth. But you see the point I mean. What's going on here is that straight after the murder of Duncan, if you believe these things happen, then what is going on is it's like supernatural force say, right, you've done it, now it's your turn. Now I'm going to freak you out. Now I'm going to take you apart. Now, of course, there's also the evidence of the disruption to nature that comes after the event. Lennox is the thane that comes with Macduff to collect Duncan when they're going to find him dead. And when Macduff goes in to wake up the king and is obviously going to find him unable to be woken up, Lennox is left with Macbeth in a very awkward moment where Macbeth obviously is just a bit freaked out, waiting because he knows what's about to happen. He knows it's all going to kick off. Lennox is making conversation. What Lennox starts to talk about is how that night, while all this was going on, nature has been turning on its head. It talks about the fact that it was dark. It's got a huge kind of storm came over the land. A storm came, windows, chimneys were blown down, all kinds of ideas like that. It talks about the earth shaking. Basically, the idea, and there was the owl was hooting all night. The owl very much associated with evil ideals. Essentially, the night that this was all happening, the supernatural came and ran riot. And then, in one of the great scenes at the end of Act 2, Ross, the Thane of Ross, who we've seen as a messenger so often, is having a conversation with an old man. I have no idea why that's happening, but never mind. It's the Ross and the old man thing. The only reason there's an old man there is because basically it just means he is an old man. Therefore, it proves that in the past this hasn't happened before. He says, "I'm 17. I've never seen this." And if you remember, in that bit, there's all kinds of things he talks about that have happened since the murder. He talks about the thing about there being an earthquake. He talks about what we think of as an eclipse, it being sunny in the middle of the day, and the darkness comes. It's all right, it's a test. That's what she was saying to me. Don't worry. But if you feel the floor getting a bit hot underneath, just let me know. Anyway, Ross and the old man, as I said, have this conversation about that. And then there's these strange bits, aren't there? There's this thing about how a falcon has been attacked and killed by a mousing owl. So two predators, one small predator has taken on and killed a larger predator. You get this thing about Duncan's horses, very strange one, I'm sure you remember it, who go wild, break out their stalls and then start eating each other. Nature turning on its head, the natural order being disrupted. Nature is feasting on things. And then, of course, the obvious, Banquo's ghost. Okay? Banquo's ghost, which appears, and I would call this the climax of the play. Again, if we're looking at how they bring chaos, I would argue for you that at the beginning of the scene, the Banquo's ghost scene, Macbeth is at his strongest. He is king. He has everybody around him. All these things around him, they're all sucking up to him. He's just heard from the murderer that Banquo, his one possible threat, is gone and dead. He has complete power. Everything's working for him. Then in comes the ghost. In comes the ghost, only he can see. He starts yelling abuse at it. He starts yelling abuse at it. He starts shouting at it. To everybody else in the room, it's bizarre. And also, he's shouting at it things like, you know, I didn't do it. You know, don't shake your blood-covered locks at me. All those kind of ideas in there. At that point, everyone around him, certainly as soon as they know Banquo's gone missing, is going to get what's happened. At that point, it's the end of his kingship and he's on his way down. I would argue that's the climax of the play. And just like the dagger, it's them bringing chaos into it. You think you've got it, you think you're there, you've got nothing. And finally, I mentioned it before with the sleep. At the end of the play, they disrupt Lady Macbeth. How they disrupt her? Well, one of the things you may well be aware of is that earlier on in the play, Lady Macbeth points out that her valor, her spirit is in her tongue, is in the way that she can speak, her ability to persuade. And we find that, we see that. Lady Macbeth's strength is in her words. This is her last line in the play. And look at it, her words have fallen apart. The one thing she had, her language, has fallen to pieces. She's reduced to just repeating, come, 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 giving a hand, to bed, to bed, to bed. They have disrupted the one thing that she has got and taken it away from her. They bring chaos everywhere, and that's the central part of it. Now, the last thing I want to leave you with is the important aspect of something that's associated with them in here, which, of course, is equivocation. Now, you may be aware of equivocation already. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because of time, so you may need to look it up further. But essentially, equivocation is a way of saying something that is true, but making it sound like you're saying something different. Okay? And this is something that is associated with the supernatural throughout. Example. At the beginning, when they're hailing him, how to thee, Thane of Glance? They say, how to thee, Thane of Cawdor? It sounds like a prediction, and then it becomes true. The trouble is, and Shakespeare's made sure that we know this. Shakespeare's structure, very, very important. In the scene before, we've just watched Duncan say, he's not Thane of Cawdor anymore, I'm giving it to Macbeth. So we know he's Thane of Cawdor at that point as well. So the witches don't actually know any more than us there. It sounds to him like they are saying you're going to become it, but they're not. They're saying you already are. We have Banquo, and I mentioned this in the Macbeth and Banquo one. Banquo's spotting, and this is important, that Banquo spots equivocation. He says it's possible that the instruments of darkness are just winning us over to betray us later. When we get the Act 4, Scene 1 prophecies and predictions there, remember, there's an obvious one. None of woman born shall harm Macbeth, they say to him. Macbeth wants to hear this and therefore doesn't question it. If you were being slightly cynical, you'd sit there and go, why didn't you just say no one? Why none of woman born? Because it's like a riddle, isn't it? That's the thing that we're going towards. It's equivocation, makes you think that way. And then the apparitions. In Act 4, Scene 1, if you don't remember well enough through this, it is 3 apparitions that are conjured that tell him these prophecies. It's not the witches themselves. That's what the cauldron's for. That's what the potion they do is for. They conjure these apparitions. And if you look at the apparitions, they tell you the truth. Beware Macduff, says an armed head, a head with armour on. What does Macduff do to him? Chops his head off while he's wearing armour. None of woman born shall harm Macbeth, says a bloody child. A child covered in blood. Why covered in blood? Because it's been taken out of its parent's belly, mum's belly, cesarean section. Exactly what happens there. Macbeth shall never vanquish be till Burnham Wood, great Burnham Wood to high Dunstane Hill shall come against him. Told to him by a child, Malcolm, child of Duncan, crowned, because he can become king, with a branch in his hand, because that is exactly what they do when they're marching forward to hide their numbers and the truth of it. It's all there for him, but they know, therefore they can get away with it. And the line I want to leave you with here at the end then, she's not telling anything. I'd love to go into more detail about this, but I can't. This is a little bit of the porter. It's not very important to us most of the time. But the porter starts talking in his speech about an equivocator. Now, it's actually a reference to a particular historical figure, and it's all to do with the Gunpowder Plot and Catholicism and whatever. I'd like to go into it, I haven't got time. But the idea, he says, is that what does an equivocator do? Somebody who equivocates. They swear on both the scales against the other one. One side, they'll swear the other one's wrong, but they can also swear that side is right and that's wrong. And they commit treason by doing so. But here's the point. You can't equivocate to get into heaven. Supernatural forces. As I said to you, essentially the antagonist. It does need Macbeth to commit it, but don't underestimate the power that they have and the influence they have. And if any question comes up about that, hopefully that should sit there for you as a very interesting conceptual way of looking at it. Thank you very much. Okay. You got anything to sign? I shall sign for you. There we go. No problem. Thank you. There we are. So can you sign through?
No, it's for one that makes
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I don't have mine next week.
Yeah, just come to me. I know you're going to
Yeah.
so it's not going to be a problem. You haven't changed that much. Second page, you. Second page.
Very proud of it.
There you go. And there we are. Lovely stuff. Thank you very much. Another crumpled one. Look at that. It didn't even have a name on it. Could have given that to anybody.
What are you doing?
There you go. Thank you very much. There you see. It wasn't you last week, was it? No, it wasn't at all. Right. And that's Sophia, Molly, Kushpreet, Eva. There we go. Lovely.
Thank you, sir.
No problem.
Lisa.
And here's Lily again. Excellent. The gang are back. There we are. I'll tell you what, if you lot don't all get nines, I'm going to be very disappointed in myself. There we go. And always last but never least,